David Vizard here. You guys are watching PowerTec 10. In this episode, I'm doing something a little different. Lately, I've either had communications which have asked me about exhaust systems, especially after I did my EcoBoost one, about what were the best exhaust systems to get the least loss from back pressure. Well, I did keep on referring them to a video I did ages ago, right at the beginning of this series. Then I thought I'll take a look at that and see how well I did on it, because it was done when I didn't have that much in the way of editing skills. Anyway, I took a look at it and I realized that it could do with a tidying up, and I also took a look at the number of subscribers I had back then. Wasn't very many. Now the video itself did very well considering the number of subscribers, but I've got something like 10 times the number of subscribers now, and the number of views that video had, that no loss exhaust video had, was commensurate with the number of subscribers I had back then. So I thought probably only about 10% of my potential viewers have watched it. So I thought, well, now's the time to clean it up, tidy it all up, do some up-to-date editing on it, and relaunch it. So that's exactly what I've done here. Now, for those of you who've already seen it, you might want to watch it again. I think I've simplified things a bit there. Essentially, it says the same things as it said before, but hopefully it's clearer. For those of you who haven't seen it, here's how to build what most channels will tell you is impossible, i.e. a no-loss, street sound legal system. That means no horsepower lost. When I say no, I mean none. And a sound level that's okay for the street. Not the quietest, but it will pass street legal sound levels. So, here we go. So, what is this video I suggest you watch? It's the one where you could say, I cheated without cheating. Nothing on my car was illegal, and yet I managed to make my stalker absolutely whoop everybody else. And there is so much to this plot that isn't involved in the workshop at all, or on the track. It just shows you just need to be smarter than the other guy. But half of it is you need to know that these things can be done. And with that, go and watch that video. Well, so much for our intro. Now let's get down to the topic in question here. It's one that's going to take me quite a while to go through, because I think that I should start off at square one. But essentially, the subject matter is how to build a zero power loss, street legal in terms of sound, exhaust system. Now, I'm sure you've been told many times that it's not possible. Well, it obviously isn't possible with people who don't have the know-how, but I can tell you from first-hand experience it is. And it's not that hard to do. So, where shall I start? Okay, let's go back to my mini days. My God, we are going back a while. Whilst I was doing my big mini book, it's a 500 A series engine build book. It's a 528 page book. We needed to build some stout street motors. And one of the big problems with these engines is that mufflers that were available for them simply killed 10 horsepower. Now, if you've got a big honking V8, that's no big deal. 10 horsepower off, say, 550, you wouldn't notice it. But when you've got an engine which is, say, 100 horsepower, and you reduce it to 90, then that's starting to be something that you need to concern yourself with. So what happened here is, whilst I was writing the book, I had a friend of mine who worked in a big muffler factory, biggest in Europe. He was chief engineer there. And I talked to him about what we could do about designing a muffler for the A-series engine, and specifically for the original Mini. Well, we did just that. We designed one that, if you had a Mini which made 110 at the wheels, and that's a pretty stout Mini, on open exhaust, and you put this muffler on, it made exactly the same power with it on. But it was totally street legal. I don't mean barely street legal. It was quiet. So what this told me back then is that mufflers aren't designed with power in mind, consistent with the muffling. They're mostly designed to just choke up the engine and get the job done as cheaply as possible. There are some abysmal mufflers out on the market. Now let's fast forward a while. Back in the mid-70s, I lived in Tucson, and I bought myself a Chevy-powered Pontiac Trans Am. It had the California spec 305 Chevy in it, which was chronically underperforming. Anyway, so I decided to build a 350. And of course, this wouldn't be hard to do because I'd read all these stories in Hot Rod magazine and the like, and they gave some pretty good information on it. Or so I thought. So basically, following information that I'd read about in magazines, I built a 350, ported the heads on it, etc., 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 and put it on the dyno, and it made a paltry 350 horsepower. Now, I was expecting at least 100 more than that. I finally got that extra 100 horsepower. But when I bought some turbo mufflers, guess what? They were turbo in name only. There was no performance aspect about them at all. They choked up the engine. Killed about 25 to 30 horsepower. This was not what I was expecting. So I sawed the muffler up. Well, I also bought a spare one to put on the flow bench, but I sawed up the mufflers we had and looked at them, and I was horrified by the design. Now, I don't have muffler design experience. I'm just a plain old ordinary engineer, right? I've got a degree in mechanical engineering, but it doesn't cover mufflers. So I have to think my way through muffler design, right? So anyway, what I did was I teamed up with my friend in England, and we designed a muffler. He did the acoustics for it, I did the airflow, and we came out with a muffler that we tried on the engine, and a pair of them, and dynoed the engine, and sure enough, managed to have a 0 power loss with these mufflers on. And it was reasonably quiet. Wasn't perfect at this stage, but that was a prototype. Anyway, as luck would have it, the boss of a large muffler company, and I'll think of the name in a minute, that's brain fade again, happened to come in the day after we were dyno testing. Happened to come into the dyno shop that I was using. And the boss there told him, hey, David's got a new muffler here that works very well. It's 0 power loss and pretty much noise legal. Right? Really? He says, if you can demonstrate that, I'll buy the design off you. So, hey, we demoed the muffler. And sure enough, he right there and then wrote out a formal agreement to buy the design so long as it carried through to the production one. Bit of a snag, we had to put our design into a smaller case, which is never good, but we managed to do it. Now there's a story attached to this. That's what I'm going to tell you about next. On the basis of this test with our two mufflers on my Trans-Am engine, we kind of went ahead and designed a muffler that would fit in their case. Now this was smaller than the one we had originally done. It was a pretty small one. But anyway, we managed to make it work, and the first one we came out with was a 2 1/4 inch one. Well, about that time, there was rumors that Hot Rod was going to do a muffler test. And I kind of played it close to the wind here, just to make things happen a bit quicker. I decided to kind of drop a hint to the then editor of Hot Rod magazine, Leonard Emanuelson, good friend of mine from way back when, that I was going to do one. So just to beat me to the draw, he sped up the tests. Now here's the problem. Gail Banks was going to run these tests, and he was going to run a big block Chevy through a single 2 1/2 inch muffler. Do everything that was out there. Now the problem was, we only had a 2 1/4, and I remember the boss at the muffler company called me up and said, what are we going to do? And I said, just swedge open the intake and exhaust so it's 2 1/2. Right? He says, but the guts are still 2 1/4. I said, yes, but those other mufflers aren't very good, so I think our 2 1/4 one will beat everybody's 2 1/2. Well, it did. I was not going to run a muffler test, but Leonard sped things up, and sure enough, Gail Banks did this test, and our muffler came out #1. Now then, Lenny did not know that I had designed that, and that was a deliberate move on my part not to let him know, because that would have probably have stopped him from testing the muffler, for the simple reason that he didn't want to appear biased. Now then, that muffler came out under the name of the Sonic Turbo. My friend and I got about 7 or 8 patents on that, and it hung around as #1 out there for years and years and years. And then Cyclone, that was the name of the company, got bought out by Walker. And the first thing they did was to bring out a muffler which used some of the same concepts, although it did not infringe the patents. And it actually produced a slightly better muffler, but it was in a bigger case. Now, what happened from there on is that Walker stopped production of my muffler. I say my muffler, our muffler. And things kind of went dry in the muffler department as far as my life was concerned. So I was quite surprised when the PR guy, I think it was, from Walker, called up and asked if I would like to be a consultant for them, because they wanted to do some power versus flow testing. So I agreed to do that, and it's quite a lengthy process. What I did was I started off with a mini engine, a British Leyland A series engine, as was in the original Mini Cooper, and I used a super trap muffler to vary the back pressure to find out how much flow was needed per horsepower that was shown on open exhaust. Now, something I've got to tell you here, a little story about the super trap muffler. It's a piece of garbage. Basically, you cannot, using a super trap, you cannot dial in horsepower and dial out noise. You either dial out noise and dial out horsepower, or you dial in noise and dial in horsepower, but you can't do one and the other. So it's an excellent bit of marketing, and the only thing it really traps is the dollar in your wallet, in their bank account. So anyway, a little, again, aside to a side story. While I was at PRI, the guy that was the PR man for SuperTrap spotted me and called me over and says, "Hey, Mr. Vizard, all that negative stuff you're writing about our muffler is going to ruin your reputation." And I said, "Oh, really? All I'm writing is what the dyno tells me." And he says, "Yes," he said, "we all know that you can tune around those problems that you're showing." And I said, "Really? So I tell you what, come and show me how it's done, because damned if I know." Well, of course, he wasn't expecting that. Usually the deal is with a lot of engine builders, they have egos that won't allow them to admit they don't know something. I don't have that problem. That's why I get to learn so much, because as soon as I don't know something, I start to find out about it. And there's lots I don't know. That's why I spend so much time reading physics books and the like. But anyway, what that SuperTrap did is allow me to start working on how much flow was needed in the exhaust system per open exhaust, open exhaust horsepower. And it turns out that if you've got 2.3 CFM of flow at 20.3 inches, I think it is, it's 1.5 inches of mercury, same as calibration as a carburetor, then the amount of power lost to back pressure resistance is not measurable on a dyno. The flow numbers that I derived using the SuperTrap muffler as a flow restriction. This is the horsepower curve. This is the back pressure curve. You can see as back pressure drops, horsepower goes up. This is the percentage of peak horsepower. By the time we get to about here, there are no measurable gains to be seen. You'll see along here virtually 100% of our power. Does the system need back pressure? No, that's total BS. Oh, and by the way, if anyone tells you, well, an exhaust system needs some back pressure, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm lost for words, right? That's unusual. But anyway, the thing is that's it. Now, that takes care of the back pressure, but with exhaust systems, we've got other things to consider, like tuned lengths. It's already bad enough that practically every header you get out there is wrong. And I say practically, I'm kind of covering my butt here, right? I'd probably be more accurate to say that every one of them is wrong. But we'll get down to that on another video. What I need to say now is, oh, in case I forget, here's another one. The greatest marketing name of any product on the face of the planet. And it's managed to sell a product which does not do what its name says, and that is Flowmaster. They do not master flow. And I don't believe they're very good muffler designers either, because I've been looking at one of their principal products now for, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And there's a 5-cent change they can make on it that will up the power and cut the noise. And they've never figured it out. Right, so no, I don't think they know much about mufflers. Anyway, here's the deal. At this point, we're now in a situation where engine power is not lost by back pressure if the muffler has 2.3 CFM of flow per open header horsepower. Right? Now, if you've got a 500 horsepower V8, then each muffler has to deal with about 250 horsepower. So 250 horsepower times 2.3 will give you the amount of flow that muffler needs. But we got to take care of one more thing. Tune lengths, right? I got onto that and I kind of wandered off. Tuned lengths. If we use something that represents open air, like a large expanse, on the end of a collector which is tuned, then the tuned length won't be altered much, because when the pressure wave hits the muffler box, if it's big enough and empty enough, like a Flowmaster, it will think that it's reached open air, and it will reflect a pressure wave just as if that Flowmaster wasn't there. It's very important to understand the characteristics of the exhaust system, especially in terms of its pressure wave reflection. Here we've got a Flowmaster style manifold. It tends to look like this here, and it reacts like this here. Here's a straight through glass pack. It looks and reacts like this here. Now there's a great deal of difference. What we've got with the glass pack is we've extended the tuned length of the exhaust system to probably an incorrect length. Sure, it may have a lot of flow, but now the tuned length is wrong. Here, maybe not so much flow, but the tuned length is correct. So now, think of this, and this has been done by many a magazine. They flow tested a Flowmaster and they flow tested a straight through glass pack. The glass pack flows way more than the Flowmaster, but the Flowmaster makes more horsepower. And when they check at the back pressure, if they ever get that far, they find that the Flowmaster has more back pressure. And this is where that story comes from. Well, you've got to have a bit of back pressure to make it work. No. What you've done here is you've killed one aspect of making horsepower, but enhanced or saved another. When we have a muffled system on a race car, we need the headers to come around into a termination box. That needs to be at least 8 times the volume of one cylinder. What you see here is the basis of a zero loss muffled system. Ideal setup here. Exhaust comes into a termination box, right? This is the ideal shape for it here. As the exhaust comes in, hits open air here, pressure wave reflected, and has an easy path down through the pipe. It then goes into a muffler which has adequate flow, i.e. 2.3 CFM per open exhaust horsepower. Right, what we can do is simplify it. Oh, this is a balance tube. We can have this one or this one. This here is preferable. This also can work. Tuned length goes into an open muffler, nothing in it. Balance tube. That goes into a pipe with a streamlined entry so that there's no hang up of flow there, or minimized, because that 2.3 CFM has to start, 2.3 CFM per horsepower that is, has to start here, and it goes through the muffler. So that's what we need. And what happens is the pressure wave comes out the collector, comes into this termination box, which is principally empty, and reflects straight back up as if nothing's there. Now the exhaust goes on out, and it now arrives at a muffler which has 2.3 CFM per horsepower. So now it doesn't see back pressure. So what we've done here with a terminator box and a muffler is we have created a means of reflecting the pressure wave, just as if it was open air, and a means of suppressing the noise without inhibiting the flow. Net result, open header power, street legal noise. Okay, let me show you a few examples on this, so we'll do that next. Here's the Walker muffler that sort of replaced my muffler. You can see the technique that they're using here. This kind of scoop here steers the gases round a corner, into here, round here, and out. Works pretty good. Let's look at the next one. Now, this is a Flowmaster. This particular one flows quite well. Doesn't muffle very well though. Now here's a Magnum muffler, straight through steel wool glass pack muffler and a stainless steel pack. Works pretty good. This is theory put into practice. Here's an exhaust system that was done for a Corvette. Tuned length headers here, merge collectors. Here's the tuned length secondary pipe going into a big pressure wave termination box. Comes out. Oh, this is a common box, by the way, for both ones. Comes out, goes through the mufflers, 1700 CFM total flow, 704 horsepower at 7100 before, 704 after, 608 pounds-feet before, 608 after. Can't ask for much more than that. Well, it's been a few hectic days since I filmed the intro. Mostly hunting down these characters here. These are the pipes that I use to flow test mufflers on my flow bench. Here's a couple of my students from the University of North Carolina. Here we are flow testing a Borla muffler. Incidentally, Borla has some very nice high flow mufflers, so you need to check them out. But my point here is that everything that goes on the exhaust system needs to be flow checked. Not many muffler manufacturers, other than Walker, are quoting flow figures. Well, there we have it. That's about all you need to know to actually build a zero loss exhaust system. How effective can it be? Well, using these principles, we could muffle a Pro Stock right down to about street noise levels and probably only lose 5 or 10 horsepower out of the 1500 or so that they have. Would it work on a top fuel car? Well, hell no. But why would you want it to? In fact, why would you want to muffle a Pro Stock engine? Sounds beautiful to me. Mechanical music. Anyway, before I leave, I'd like to ask you to like and subscribe and comment. We do like your input, so hey, I'm busy giving you my thoughts on things. Let's have yours. Thank you for watching.